thanks to everyone who sent through their tasks for today. Really helpful. Some of them were so good. I'm just going to mute a few people, just if that's okay. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm just going to mute a few people here and there. But I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much for the people that submitted your kind of tasks. Some of them were really good. People are really getting the hang of mixing basically this idea of like setting a scene and then bringing in these elements. Like I know we talked about it yesterday, this idea of bringing in music, this idea of bringing in clips of interviews and kind of blending all those together in order to make a scene. And I hope, you know, this is something that can kind of take a long time. And actually, you know, when you're doing a training in that sense, you're kind of in a sort of synthetic environment, you're kind of thinking about it hypothetically, and it works better, obviously, when you are out in the field and you have to do it for real. But hopefully this will kind of spark the way of thinking and give you guys some kind of food for thought in terms of how you start to build these scenes. And the advantage, I mean, the thing which will really, I think, bring it home is like when you put together your first scene, when it's actually in audio, and then you have a sense that like this was worthwhile. And I think, you know, if you don't make that connection, you can kind of get this feeling where you're like, well, we could just have, you know, just voiceover. You know, I could, you know, a journalist can just talk into a mic and just explain the story, and that's enough. But I think once you see an audience's and listeners' reaction to this, like more dramatic, more documentary kind of feeling, then you'll start to realize like why it's worth the effort, you know, because obviously, like, you know, for something that takes a lot of work, you also want to be able to see why you would bother to put the work in, right? So I think that that's really important, and that will come. I mean, I would like to say that I promise that will happen, but like it's better if people see it firsthand. And I think once you kind of get into that and move into that stage, like there were some scenes that people submitted to me today that were really action-packed. You know, they really moved the story along. They blended this idea of like having some voiceover and then mixing that with some music and some atmospheric sound and stuff like that. And obviously, at this point, how, like we said in the email and on WhatsApp, how much of it is real is debatable. But I think it's a good exercise to kind of just go through the motions of like what you think needs to be there. And I know some people post it into the group chat, but I would please, if we've had a conversation, just the two of us on WhatsApp, I'd really like if people could post their little scripts into the group, because I think it would be really helpful. So I know some people have done that, but it would be really helpful if more people could kind of see what other people are doing, you know, and just kind of scroll through and have a little bit of a read. I know that there's that, you know, you don't necessarily want to do that straight out the gate, but now that I've given some feedback to you and that kind of thing, I think if you feel confident, please put it in the group so other people can read what you've done, and we can kind of start to learn from each other and all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to give an opening to people on the WhatsApp call and people on the Zoom call in terms of if they wanted to share anything and what if they had any thoughts about what's been going on and what they've been reading in the lesson today. Yeah, like an open forum for anyone to say whatever they want. Okay. Well, if you change your mind and you have some kind of thoughts, then please just post them in the group. Okay, so we're going to move on to like what the lesson, or sorry, yeah, what the task is for today, and that's around music. Like if you think about normal intro music, especially for radio and by extension by podcast, it's usually pretty simplistic, right? There's a lot of temptation to put something that's quite complicated in a podcast, but actually you're not putting music in a podcast for people to dance to, right? You're not putting the most, often like if the music is too complicated or it's too overbearing, and especially you don't really want lyrics. And if it has all those things, you can kind of hit this problem where it detracts from the story you're trying to tell. It detracts from your voiceover. You kind of want to be able to mix it between being under voiceover and clips, and being on its own. You know, I would suggest that like you don't have to feel. I know there's a tradition in some radio to always put music underneath voiceover. You know, that almost like breakfast DJ kind of idea of like, whenever someone is speaking, people just like wallpaper music underneath it. And to be honest, that actually came from an original technical problem in terms of like, if there was any silence, right? In old school radio transmission, if there was any silence, then sometimes people's radios would cut out. So actually it was the broadcasters were motivated to always have some kind of like noise going out. So that's why they always had music or some kind of background sound. But like, and you can all experiment with this in however you want, but what you'll kind of see is that often things can be way more powerful if you use music more sparingly. And if you connect, so you can use a clip of music to kind of separate a scene. And I've done that a lot of times. Like you kind of have this feeling of like, phew, okay, we've established a certain fact, or we've done a scene, or we've finished with a character. And now you're like, okay, let's have a little bit of music just to kind of indicate to the listener that something is changing and something is moving over. You can definitely do that. But the next stage, which is what I was outlining in today's task, is this sense of like emotion linked to music. And we all watch, we might not be that familiar with this in audio, like in radio, but like we're very familiar with it in television and movies. So if, and I don't want to say this in a way that you know, everyone has had this experience. You've watched something and then you've felt that the music is kind of exaggerating your emotions, right? It might be something that's tense. It might be something that's romantic. It might be something, you know, anything that you can kind of think of, which is linked to an emotion. The music will come in when that happens, and it will make the emotion feel stronger inside you. What's interesting, and what I encourage you all to do, is to kind of just, anything you listen to or watch in the next few days, to just really pay attention to that. Because often, you know, by design, it's there to kind of not be thought about, right? It's just there in the background. You're focusing on the story, you're focusing on the characters. You're not, it's not like the music isn't saying to you, listen to me. But once you start noticing it, you will notice it everywhere, and you will start to see the kind of cues that you can then use in your audio storytelling to make your story better, you know. And I don't want to stress, like, there's a very important note here, and you'll see it in very sentimental productions and maybe some soap operas and things like that. There's an opportunity where you can use music too much, and it can be too almost like cliched, and that makes it worse. So I think I put that in the lesson, that like too much music, too exaggerated, almost all those things, people can kind of feel that it's actually detracting from your story. And that's a matter of taste. It's a matter of like your own personal taste. It's a matter of what you think works. It's a matter of you playing, like I keep saying, like playing it to someone that you trust, and then just asking them honestly. You know, you need it, you know. I kind of often think like you shouldn't be playing your stuff or showing your scripts to someone who always just says everything you do is great, right? You need to find the person who you trust, who will be nice to you, not cruel, but will give you some honest feedback in terms of like, this does not work, like this is too much. And I think the music side of things is often something that a lot of people, if they haven't done this before, kind of think they can do. And I still struggle with it. And we get, often there's, in big productions, there will be a sound engineer, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with in a radio station, and they will help with the music. And kind of my instinct is often to overdo the music and to kind of be a bit too dramatic, or maybe there's too much of it and stuff like that. And often we get into a situation where he'll be like, oh, you've got to kind of dial this back a little bit, and you've got to kind of just less is more, you know, that old idea of less is more. However, on that, and I did mention this in the lesson, is this, what you want is to be able to start building a library of music that is linked to emotion. And you know, you can find this on YouTube. You can find, there's a few examples in the lesson of places where the rights are free. So essentially you can't use like, you know, your favorite pop song from Spotify, because ultimately if you try and upload that anywhere, the software is getting sophisticated enough that it will actually just like pull your podcast down if it detects that you've been using music that is you don't have the rights to, basically. And that includes basically all popular music. So even though you might feel, oh, you know what would be great here is to have whatever kind of pop song or latest hit, if you put that in, like, on the one hand, people might identify, there's a positive to it in that people will identify with it, like you when you hear it in a movie or something like that. But like the truth of the matter is that people often pay huge amounts of money to put a popular song in their movie, and you need to avoid that, and you don't want to get caught with that, because then all sorts of things can happen. If you put your podcast on YouTube, you can get like suspended from YouTube, all that sort of stuff. Even when I'm uploading these videos, right, which is just us talking, YouTube scans all the audio and the video to make sure there is no rights violations. And that's why it actually takes longer. It's actually most of the time now when you upload to YouTube is that it's just scanning for something, is scanning for content that isn't infringing on people's rights. So that's a long way of saying that you're limited to two things, I assume. I mean, obviously, if you work for somewhere with so much money that you can pay for rights music, that's also a different thing. But usually you're limited to two things. One of them is rights-free music, which you can find, literally all over the internet. Like you just Google rights-free music and you can find some of it is pretty good. Some of it is quite exciting. Some of it will kind of do what you need it to do. Another option is to think about getting music composed specifically for your podcast. And that will depend entirely on who you know, right? So I've had friends in the past, very close friends, who have kind of done, we've definitely paid them, but they've also done quite like mates rates kind of thing of like, they want to be part of the production and they might compose a little piece of music or maybe lots of pieces of music. When we did the first season of Alibi, a musician, a very talented musician who I posted his podcast this morning, How I Make Music, and he produced a lot of the music for Alibi, and he's very good. And that can be incredibly exciting. It's a very long process, right? Because you kind of go through this thing of like, we need a piece of music that, like often if it's an investigative thing, it's like, there's a piece of music which will show that something interesting is happening. You're like, that's so vague. So it can be very exciting to talk to a music composer and get them to kind of put together a little piece of music that then you put into your production. But it can get away from you. And sometimes if the production that you're doing isn't that complicated, you can also find it on the internet. And some sites are in between where you might pay like $2 to use it, but like ultimately I would recommend that you either get it for free or you ask someone to compose something. So I think that's a really exciting thing. I just wanted to break here and just ask if anyone had any questions. I can see that Daniel posted, I think because his connection is, he posted something in the chat, which you guys can read. He says, hello, everyone. I've asked a musician to make a short music lyric for my podcast. My question is it a problem to use the same music in the beginning of each episode? If so, what can be the benefit of doing that? Now, I think that's a great question. So, Daniel, basically, that is a positive, I would say, to use that intro music, the same intro music at the beginning of each episode. I think obviously people have clicked on their phones and they know that they're listening to your podcast. So it's not like a surprise, but at the same time, it registers to people like, this is the show, this is the musical identity of the show. And, I think the mistake that some new podcast users do is that music at the beginning is very long, and it like really doesn't have to be long. You can listen to other podcasts and see how actually short but often distinctive that little clip of music can be. And then people are kind of like, okay, this is what I'm listening to. This kind of like, like anything from a TV show, like the intro credits, it kind of hammers home what you're doing. I did want to segue a little bit into something which I am very prone to doing, and you don't have to do this, but what I find can be very effective is to start the show or the episode in the middle, like almost in the middle of action. Like I saw someone's script today, they did exactly this and it was very effective. And basically you go right in and you're like, something exciting is happening, and it kind of sets the scene for what's going to be happening in the story or the episode. And then after about, I wouldn't say longer than 2 minutes, probably quite a bit less than that, you can cut into the intro music and then do your credits. This kind of resonates with what someone said the other day in terms of laying out all the facts first and then going into the character. And what I would encourage people to do with this kind of storytelling is to imagine that your listener, they've clicked on, because it's not radio, right? It's not live, but they've clicked on what they want to listen to. But at the same time, so on the one hand, they're dedicated to you in that way, but on the other hand, they can quite easily click on their phone to anything else in the world. So you need to like hold people's attention past that initial phase. And I feel that by doing this like sort of action intro and then going into what is probably quite necessary but basic credits, like hello, your name, the name of the show, like blah blah blah, maybe a sponsor that you have, that kind of thing. By doing that, after you've got people interested, if you think of like what they call like a cold open, if you do that, you don't have to, but I would recommend that you experiment with that technique, because it can be really powerful and it can really it can be fun as well. Like it creates like a fun feeling for people when they're kind of plunged into action. Okay, I've spoken a lot. Does anyone have any questions or any comments? You can unmute yourself and say that, or you can post it in the chat, in the WhatsApp chat, if you have a question. If there aren't any questions, then basically I just encourage you to look at the task for today around music. I mean, it sounds strange to give a task to say, listen to music, but given the script and the story that we've been working on all week, I want you to kind of think about what music would be appropriate. So, part of it is a real exercise in finding this music. Part of it is just to take a little bit of time and to sort of like allow yourself to think through it and allow yourself to kind of imagine what music would be appropriate. Like we've done projects in the past where especially if it's for a client. So I used to do a lot of client podcasting work, and you can get very linked to the musical taste of your client. You can imagine, right? You're doing like a podcast for a big company, and you have a person that you're working with, and then often in those situations, the music that they want is not always linked to what should be appropriate, but can be just like music that they like, and they want that music. And none of us are in that situation with what we're talking about. But I guess I bring that up to kind of, you need to balance what you like in terms of the music taste you have and what is appropriate for your story, what is appropriate for, like I say, like quite simplistic music, which will work with podcasts, right? So it can't be overly complicated, can't have rights, and it can definitely be music that you like, but you've just got to be aware of not just overloading the work that you do just with music you enjoy, because that might not work. And also, lastly, that thing that I brought up at the front of like emotion and what music triggers what emotion, and that's very hard to articulate. Like you can, we all know like a tense emotional, a tense musical piece that, like, when someone is breaking into a house and there's someone stuck in the kitchen waiting to hopefully not be attacked. We all know that scene and we know that music that will play in that movie, but it's a process to kind of do it yourself and to kind of think about that in podcasting. So yeah, so that's something to think about. Just lastly, we don't have a lesson tomorrow, so Fridays are free, and we'll start on day 5 of the course on Monday. So I know it's not the weekend. I know you guys will all be working tomorrow in your jobs, but allow what you've been doing to kind of sink in, what we've all been doing. If any of you haven't done the tasks and you still want to do them, feel free to send them to me over the next few days and I'll take a look at them. And otherwise, yeah, have a great time. The music is a fun part, so enjoy yourself. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you a lot, Paul. Very good.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you a lot.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much. I'll speak to you soon.
Sure.
Thank you. Bye.